Hello and welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. I'm Juliet Corbett. I'm an executive coach and strategist, and I work one-to-one with senior leaders, guiding them to find their strategic focus, empower their teams, and regain control over their time.
And I'm Lucy Gower. I'm a facilitator, trainer and coach, and I empower leaders to build their happy, confident and high-performing teams. Today we're going to be talking about trust and hybrid working as a result of something that a listener sent in to us. I'm going to read out the request. That there's something really interesting going on where organisations are trying to use hybrid working policies to manage behaviour rather than actually addressing performance management issues and having honest conversations. Bringing people into the office doesn't fix those issues, it only leads to presenteeism. Working in the office together should be about collaboration and sharing ideas. It feels like there is something to say on how leaders approach this. Juliet, do you have something to say about this?
Yes, I have many things to say about this. I think when I first read this, it felt like it was blindingly obvious to me that you don't need to bring people physically into an office in order to manage behavior. And actually, being a leader involves being courageous and having courageous conversations about performance issues, and whether that is having them directly, whether that is role model setting kind of contracting for expectations, that all of that is what a leader should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's hard, they should be doing it regularly. Mm-hmm. And yet I can also see how it might feel easier to feel like you're solving some of those problems by requesting people to be in the office more frequently rather than just facing the difficult conversation. So it seemed to me both that the question really resonated, like I can see this happening, I know it happens a lot, and it seemed really obvious to me that leaders need to step up and be courageous and address the actual issue rather than solving it by using hybrid working. And trust is at the key to this. Lucy, what did you think when you read this, when it came in?
Yeah, I read it and I thought, that I hadn't really thought about some of the challenges with hybrid working around this. And I remember right at the very beginning of the pandemic when everyone had to work from home. I was part of a workshop where senior leaders were saying, well, we are anxious about productivity when people are working from home and we can't keep an eye on them. And in the most cases, the problem wasn't that people weren't doing enough, it was that people were working all the time and burning out. And I still see a lot of that now. And I remember saying, well, I actually don't think that that's the problem that you have right here. The problem you have is that you don't trust your people to be doing the work. That's the crux of it. And it kind of doesn't matter where or how they're working if there's a fundamental trust problem. And I think if you don't, as a leader, if you don't trust your team to be doing the work, it goes both ways. That if I was a member of a team and my manager said I needed to be in the office but didn't have a compelling reason for why that was important, and I perhaps was told or was second guessed that it was about productivity, I would feel that trust had been betrayed. And when that happens, as we've talked about previously, like trust being the foundation of everything, when that starts to erode, it sends a ripple effect out, and that's your bigger problem.
Which is interesting because you've got a negative reinforcement cycle there. So you've got the leader feeling like they can't trust the team to do the work unless they're physically present. And then the team thinking, oh, well, if you don't trust me because you need me to be physically present to observe me doing the work, if you don't trust me, then I don't trust you either. And then there's a conflict sometimes between the values that are being stated. We value honesty, openness, kind of hard work, whatever your values are that you are either saying or role modeling to the team. If then the behavior that's happening is we need you to be here so we can check up on you, there's a disconnect between the values that are being stated and the values that are actually being lived.
Exactly. And I think that there's something around what I'm seeing at the moment is almost like another discussion about hybrid working. And I don't want this episode to be about the pros and cons of hybrid working, but it feels that there's another sort of resurgence of we need to be back in the office. And I don't know universally why that is, but if the undercurrent of it is that we want you back so we can keep an eye on you, whether that's true or not, if that's how it's been interpreted,
Yeah.
that doesn't sit very well at all with the teams. And
Yeah.
and if there isn't a good reason to be back in an office, if you've loved working from home, if you're really productive, you've got that kind of balance sorted out after 5 years of doing it, and then you're told that you have to come back in, that can be massively demotivating if there's not a compelling reason as to why that is. And for me, it just every time I talk this from different angles, it just comes back to trust. If you don't trust your people, then maybe they're not the right people. Maybe there's things that you can do differently about how you inspire and encourage and lead them. And if you and it works both ways. If you don't trust your organization or your senior leadership, and you're not thinking differently about how you can inspire that trust, the trust and lack of trust runs both ways, and you kind of have to take a bit of a leap of faith and choose to trust somebody and give them the benefit of the doubt in order to get that back.
Yeah, absolutely. We did an episode some time ago now. We'll put the link in the episode notes. It was a while ago, but we were talking about the kind of pros and cons of hybrid working, and a lot of this was around you've got a bigger talent pool potentially. If you offer hybrid working, you've got different people with different working rhythms, how you get the best out of a really high performer is giving them flexibility to work in a way that works for them. And then there was the collaboration. Potentially there are times when being in the same room physically together is really beneficial. So there is a balance to be had as to what works in a particular organization. And we talked about some of those issues a while back in that other episode. But certainly I'm going to come out and say, I think it's lazy leadership is to say, right, we're all going to be in the office more. We're going to refuse requests for hybrid working, remote working, because it's easier for me to build a team that's going to be high performing in the office. I just think that's being a bit lazy.
I also disagree that a team that is always in the office equals high performance necessarily.
Agreed.
It's not as linear as that. And especially when I think about so much of the work that you and I both do with leaders about slowing down to speed up, about how you can have your best ideas out on a walk or doing something completely different. This idea of needing to be present at our desks to do our best work actually makes me really upset. Feels like we've gone back to industrial revolution, which is why we're all in a 9 to 5 in the first place.
There's a sense about different sectors being different as well. So I do a lot of work in the education sector, and there are certain roles within the education sector where there is a requirement, at least in a traditional school setting, for example, that teaching is happening face to face. And so there is also a little bit of allowing people to harness that opportunity to get their best ideas by going for a walk in a way that fits the requirements of each role. And I've had a lot of leaders who have struggled with the equity question around, well, if our teachers have to be on site, maybe all of our admin team also need to be on site. And there's that complex difference between equity and equality, where actually if you're going to treat everybody identically, then yes, maybe you do then require people to be on site. But actually what we're trying to achieve is everyone doing their best work, and knowing that teachers have a much more condensed working year. So they sprint for each term, and then they get a holiday time where they might be off completely or have a very, very different rhythm to their working life. Whereas the administrative team, they will be there most of the year with classic kind of, working holidays as you would have for any employee. And yet you can't expect them to sprint for the entire year. They're running a marathon. They need to pace themselves in a different way. So I think it is sector specific, and it is about allowing the individuals in the team to find the rhythm that is best for them, taking into account the role description or what it is they're actually doing in their working day.
I completely agree. You make such an excellent point about equity. there in terms of different roles with across a whole range of different sectors. And in the thing that you said at the end there about different teams working at different paces and in different ways, I think you said we have to acknowledge that different teams work differently. I'm going to change acknowledge for trust. You have to trust that different teams work differently and different individuals work differently based on when they can be most productive. What else is going on for them? You know, if you have children, you're caring for other people, you perhaps have a really long commute. There's lots of difference for all of us in terms of how we do our best work and how we interact with others to be able to do that. And trusting definitely. People to do their best work is an element of that, I think.
So when it comes to performance management, a lot of it is around courageous conversations. And we've talked about that in previous episodes, and we'll link to those as well. I wonder, Lucy, whether we dive into that trust question really specifically in this conversation, because we use that word a lot in a lot of the episodes that we've put out there. So maybe we could unpack what we mean by that and what to do about it. Agreed. How to create trust, what to do about it when it starts to fracture or break down. And where should we start?
So I think, just to be really clear, we're moving into trust here because what we're saying is that asking everyone to be back in the office is almost like a way of managing perceived underperformance without having those courageous, difficult, challenging, whatever word we want to use, conversations. And so it's avoiding that. And I think that, so one of the things that builds trust, like trust is about trusting yourself and your team and your colleagues to have your back, tell it like it is, be honest if a piece of work was good enough or not good enough, or you're underperforming, trusting that you're going to be told. If you've never received that feedback, you can't be expected to know if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. If the quality of your work isn't good enough. And just because somebody's there doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing their best work. So I think for me, if having someone in the office is instead of having a really good feedback conversation, that's my starting point for trust. You need to trust that your manager will tell you if you've done a great job, and that they'll tell you if there's something else or differently that you could be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So trust is really rooted in clarity of expectations, and that I guess goes both ways, because trust is like a experience of a gut feeling of confidence in the other person to do the right thing, to have kind of integrity, that their intent is good, that they're reliable, that they're skilled, that they can do their work. It's a gut level experience that can very easily get shaken by the smallest thing. And so if we're trying to demonstrate, either as a leader or as a member of a team, that we are trustworthy, understanding what's expected of us is a key part, because then we know we can deliver. And if we can't deliver for whatever reason, that kind of integrity, the authenticity of it, is we proactively explain that something's happened. We're not going to be able to deliver on this particular expectation. This is what we're going to do about it. And that can maintain trust because you've got that clarity of expectation both ways within the relationship.
And sometimes people don't even have clear objectives, or their objectives might be clear, but their understanding of them isn't clear. And that, if that's not addressed, then you think you're doing really well, but perhaps you're not, or perhaps you're over delivering. It can work both ways, I think.
Yeah, which is why when we're talking about objectives, we want to be really clear on exactly what's happening. The objectives need to be really, really tactical. They're not waffly, abstracted descriptions of what we hope is going to happen. They need to be really specific, and where possible or where appropriate, have some kind of numbers attached to them, or at least a timeline, depending on whether this is an ongoing process. It's fine, you don't have a finished timeline, but certain responses need to happen with a certain time, for example, or it might be a certain project needs to be completed by a certain time frame. But being as specific as possible in describing those objectives, because those objectives are basically making sure you both understand the world the same way in terms of the expectation.
Yeah.
And if it's not possible, you need to say early, actually, I don't think this is unreasonable. It's unrealistic for us to expect this particular speed or this particular quantity in terms of the way you've set out that objective. That needs to be discussed early. And there's an adaptability to come back and reframe it over time.
And therein almost lies a chicken and egg situation with trust. So I was thinking about what you said about, trust being a gut feeling, but I also think that as a leader, choosing to trust the people in your team and your senior leadership and your colleagues is a deliberate decision. And it's almost like you need to show that you trust other people in order to gain that back. I think trust is earned as well as it being a decision that you make.
Yes.
So you choose to trust the person. If they say they're going to do a thing when they're going to do it, does that make sense? If someone says they're going to do something by a certain deadline, that you trust that that's going to happen. There we go. That felt better.
Trust it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Until you're proven wrong. So benefit of the doubt until you're proven wrong. And I know that I've been in situations when I've worked in an organisation that I'm just remembering now where, I would have a deadline of 3 weeks tomorrow to do something, which I have a very high, if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. And the manager was like, have you done the thing yet? It's like, no, it's not ready. You said you didn't need it for another couple of weeks. I'm like, do you not trust that I'm going to do it? So that can erode it too. It comes back to what you're saying about clear boundaries and communication.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I find really interesting is because trust is experienced at an individual level, it's actually almost impossible to say that an organization trusts a person. That just doesn't kind of make sense. It's a person trusts a person. So because it's felt at an individual level, the other thing I think is really interesting is that we can sometimes get a little bit misled by our gut feelings about trust. I mean, it could be something as simple as someone that you meet reminds you of someone who's been untrustworthy or that you didn't really like in your past, and just their kind of their similarity, resemblance to that person, like deep down you might not automatically trust that person, and
that could be really subconscious as well.
Very subconscious. We don't pick up on it, and so it's all about understanding, having the self-awareness to understand if I'm left at the end of a working day with a feeling of distrust for somebody, it's simultaneously honoring your gut feeling and knowing it may or may not be true.
Yeah.
And so finding ways that you can then sense check what's happening with someone else. That might be a confidential, quiet conversation with somebody else around you, just to sense check other people's feelings around a particular project and whether the particular person is able to deliver that. It might be a confidential conversation with a coach or somebody outside the organization who's able to unpick whether there's anything else going on in terms of connections to other things that have happened for you in the past, or the people you've met. But at the basic level, even if it's just going to be you and you don't want to share that with anybody else, just writing down the list of the evidence that you have for not trusting this person can be a good way of just starting to unpack the truthfulness of this gut feeling that you're having. And then a game to play, and you mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, a game to play which 3 or 4 weeks, you give it a little bit of time. What does life look like if you choose to trust this person 100%?
Yeah.
And as you then play with that mindset, you're putting on that hat of that mindset of, I trust this person 100%. What evidence are you receiving that's challenging that? And actually, I've worked with a couple of people that even just doing that enabled them to see something completely different in a month's time when we had our next coaching session. And although there were still dynamics that needed to be unpacked and there were still difficult conversations that need to be had, it looked very different coming at it from a point of view of, I assume I trust this person, rather than coming from the point of view of, I'm not even going to question my gut instinct, I just don't trust them.
I think that what you're talking about there is like all the biases and assumptions that we all carry with us about,
of course,
people and situations. And in this context of, if we are saying that trust is the foundation for good team working and performance, is like notice what your gut is saying and choose to assume that trust is there. And if you don't
Yeah.
trust someone, they won't trust you back. It's
Yeah.
incredibly difficult. So I think what I would
Yeah.
add is like, what are all the reasons that are showing that they are not trustworthy? What are all the reasons to showing that I can trust them? And
You
I'd
can.
have two
Yes.
columns.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I think that's really an important point to make, actually. And then you might come to a conclusion, no, my gut instinct was right.
Yeah.
I don't trust this person, which is
And
fine.
they've
Okay,
proven, yeah.
now you know. That's okay. So then is,
And then
okay,
it's
what do we
dealing
need
with
to
it.
do?
And dealing with it
Precisely,
isn't
what is the
going,
difficult
everyone has
conversation?
to be in the office.
Correct. So then it's having the courage to not be the lazy leader if everyone needs to be in the office. It then becomes, what is the courageous conversation I need to have? And a lot of that will be around the expectations that we talked about, will be about understanding that life might look different from their point of view. So going into those meetings, really listening for their point of view, the way the world looks to them. And then you slowly work out what needs to happen to rebuild that trust where possible, or to acknowledge this is a permanent breakdown of trust. It is not possible to rebuild this, in which case it's working out, following all the appropriate HR policies, what is the way that we part ways in this particular person.
Yeah. Sorry, I spoke over you then. I got overexcited about like closing the loop of the hybrid working and trust.
It's all good. I rarely see you that excited, but obviously hybrid working is something that really energizes you. Actually, that's not true. I often see you excited about these things.
Thank you.
um, so I think, yeah, I mean, trust is at the root of this. And actually, the more I talk about it, the more I'm realizing it's avoidance. That's the word that you used earlier on. What are you avoiding? If you're defaulting to a hybrid working policy to solve other problems, classic avoidance.
Yeah, you're just
What
kicking
is the
it.
difficult conversation you
Yeah,
don't want to have?
you're kicking it down the road where it's not going to be a smaller problem in another week or month's time. So I was doing a bit of thinking before this session about, if you're listening and thinking, okay, well, how do I build trust in my team? How do I know what that looks like? And there is a TED talk that we'll share in the notes by a professor called Francis Frey from Harvard Business School, who talks about three things that are needed in order to have trust. One, that is about being authentic. So we've talked about, being your real you and showing your vulnerabilities. And part of that is about explaining, if things haven't gone well, being honest and open about things. There's something about the second bit of the triangle is your logic. So your logic, reasoning, how you make decisions, and being able to explain the logic behind something builds trust. And the third thing is around showing empathy. So, like exactly as you said, Juliet, listening to the other person, maybe getting in their shoes, taking time to give 100% of your attention. In fact, they talk about just put your mobile phone away, and that in itself will build trust. If you know what it's like if someone's half listening.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that you need all three to build trust within your communications. And that made total sense to me
Yeah.
as she was explaining it. And I'd love to know your thoughts, Juliet.
Yeah, so this isn't a model I've come across before, but as soon as you mentioned it, I'm mapping it onto the way I think about trust. And I think it really holds up really nicely, really strongly. The authentic kind of point of the triangle, a lot of what we've talked about around vulnerability on a couple of recent episodes is around that. It's around working out how you can be authentic, but that does not mean you need to share 100% of everything all the time in terms of emotion or in terms of data as well sometimes. So how can you be your authentic self, I think, is a key part of building trust. And that's because this is all about human to human interaction. The fact that we happen to be working in teams and organizations is a bit by the by, to be honest. It's a human to human kind of relationship we're talking about here. The logic is really important. I kind of think of that as the cognitive thinking, like what's the strategic rationale behind this? What's the intellectual cognitive way that we're going to proceed in setting expectations really clearly? There's a kind of a logic side to trust, and then the empathy side to trust maps onto my beliefs around the importance of intuition, the importance of listening to your feelings, not necessarily expressing your feelings raw, but being very attuned to them and what they mean about the way that you're leading or the way that you're acting within a team. So I think the 3 points of this triangle you've brought up map really nicely onto things that we've talked about before and the ways that I see leadership. So yeah, definitely put the link in the notes.
It's a helpful model.
The
other reference that I just think is worth saying, there's a book called Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, who is the son of Stephen Covey, who wrote Habits of Highly Effective People. So that must have been confusing in their household. But it's around how trust accelerates good work getting done. So when you know, like, and trust others, it kind of oils the wheels to work getting done, to collaboration, to creative thinking. It builds for psychological safety and some of the things that we've talked about before. And it's the first book that I've read that kind of gives some data around this as well. So if you are a person that likes data about why trust is a good thing, then this is a book that I'd recommend.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. I shall go away and read it with interest. I love the book recommendations you've got here because a lot of them I've read, but a good handful are new to me, which is always really exciting. Yeah. Okay, well, I think, I mean, we could talk forever about trust. It's so integral to everything else we cover. Definitely, if you're listening to this and there's some other angle on this that we haven't covered in this particular episode, do let us know, because I think it probably is something we'll be excited to return to at some point in the future, because it is like an underpinning kind of foundational element of leadership, I think. But as we wrap up, Lucy, how do you help people to build trust?
I spend time with teams helping them to get to know each other. So one of the things that builds trust is just when you know people, you can understand what makes them tick, and you can understand about what motivates them and kind of get into their shoes. So it's that empathy bit of the triangle. So I do a lot of work with teams, getting them together through storytelling, understanding values, beliefs, behaviors, and how they work together. A huge bit of my work that I actually don't talk about specifically is about how when you build trust in teams, they are more high performing. How about you, Juliet?
Yeah, so I do similar work, but one-to-one normally. So I'm working with the senior leaders, helping them to curate teams that are high trust, high performing, and helping them to process some of this stuff confidentially behind the scenes as well. Because when there is a nagging feeling of a breakdown of trust, or indeed a high stakes, actual, really obvious breakdown of trust between senior leadership team members, then it can be really, really quite difficult to navigate solo. So I help them behind the scenes.
Yeah, really difficult.
To have that sounding board.
Really difficult. Yeah. And if people are listening, is there like one or two key things that they can take away and start doing? What's your thoughts on that?
So I think, going back to the kind of the original question, I think I'm going to stick with my lazy leadership idea that if you're feeling tempted to want everybody observable, whether that's back in the office or in some other way observable, really asking questions about what is it that's underlying that, and then thinking about not so much what's the quickest solution to that, which might be bringing everybody back to the office. Instead of that is what is the high level leadership solution that's going to lead to a high performing team. And that's some of the more difficult work, but it is the work around the trust building, the performance conversations, the courageous conversations that you need to have. So knowing that it is part of leadership, that you have to step up and do this stuff that's difficult sometimes.
Yeah, agreed.
How about you, Lucy?
There's a couple of things here for me. I think there's something around building a feedback culture. So yes, that is as a leader with your team, but within your team, is there a culture where it's okay to say, great job, here's how it could be different, or what does that look like to do it in a different way or to do it better? So making that okay, just how you do things here, part of the culture. And then I think there's something around really helping people to get to know each other. So that could be that you get everyone together periodically to work on something together or for a social activity, but be really deliberate. Does everyone know each other? And when people do and understand a little bit about what makes each other tick, that really accelerates trust and high performance. So being way more deliberate about that if your team are working remotely than you would have ever had to have been if everybody was always in the same office 5 days a week.
Yeah. Fantastic. Excellent. I'm sure we will return to this at some point, but I think that's probably a good amount for today. So thank you very much for spending this time with us. I'm Juliet Corbett, executive coach and strategist, working one-to-one with senior leaders.
And I'm Lucy Gower, a facilitator, trainer and coach, and I help leaders develop high-performing teams. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with colleagues and help leverage the impact of the Quiet Leadership Revolution.